It's a new year, it's a new financial us. Let's have a chat about 8 smart ways to reset your finances and boost your wealth here at the beginning of 2024, and of course at the beginning of every year, because these are simple, standard ideas that you don't have to do, but you should think about each and every year.
It's the smart thing to do.
Using the holidays at the start of a year, or a slower time at work, depending on what you do, is a great opportunity to reset yourself financially, and in such a way that could double your 401k. It could help you save thousands of dollars in student debt, or maybe even cut almost $17,000 from your home loan. These might sound like extreme examples, but all of this is possible if you're going to sit down at some point in time in the year and have a methodical review of what you're doing financially.
Let's do it.
Beginning here in 2024, this is an ideal time to review your personal and family finances, set new goals, and take the first steps to refresh or reset. And that's what you'll hear from any decent finance specialist. Whether it's personal finance, company finance, the principles do not change.
It's fairly straightforward.
The beginning of a new year is a great time to sit down and of course review where you're at. This review is different for everyone, but there are a number of things most of us should be turning our mind to, even if they look different for each and every one of us.
Same, but different.
Obviously, for some people who are wealthy enough, this can involve a complex process of tax-effective structuring. But look, that's not most people on YouTube, and it's probably not you. And that's fine. You don't need to be that. So let's talk about 8 things that are a little bit more simple than maybe cheeky tax structuring. 8 smart ways that you can reset your finances here in 2024 and boost your wealth.
Oh, I like money.
So starting at number 1, we're going to maximize our retirement accounts. First things first, what is a retirement account? Well, look, that depends.
It all depends on who you are, where you come from.
So a lot of my viewers on here are American, so we're talking 401ks. So what is a 401k? Well, it's a retirement saving plan offered by employers to their employees. And the unique thing about a 401k is that it allows you to contribute a portion of your paycheck before taxes are taken out. One of the sweetest perks of many of these 401k plans that you should be checking is whether or not your employer is going to match your contributions prorated. This means your employer contributes money to your 401k based on how much you contribute. It's essentially free money for your retirement, and it's always something that you need to be taking advantage of.
It's free money, take it.
If you can afford to, you should be taking full advantage of the maximum amount of the employer match that is available. For my Aussie audience, like myself, this is what we call superannuation. Most nations offer this sort of incentive to save your future because it means that you won't have to rely on the government in retirement, and governments love not having people that they need to pay if they can avoid it. I know a lot of people think we live in a handout economy, and look, I'm not saying that isn't partly true, but ideally governments don't want to give you money. They'd rather you take care of yourself.
So much for relying on the government.
Now let's talk about where your 401k contributions go. Typically you have a huge range of investment options such as stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. Diversifying your investment can help manage risk and optimize your returns over time, and you should be doing this. Your 401k is a safe place. For me, with my equivalent superannuation, it is money I don't even think about. I'm required to put it aside, so I do, but the reality is I want to retire before I can access it here in Australia anyway. So it's just extra money, and in that sense it really should be considered as a fallback position, and as a fallback it should be safe and diversified.
That's actually pretty smart.
As a general comment, the more you can afford to put in here up to the maximum employer contribution, the better. You should be reviewing your finances to see whether your budget allows you to make a greater contribution every single year.
Every single year since I was 18 years old.
A second thing, if it applies to you, that you should be thinking about is getting savvy with your student debt. For the Australians, graduates and higher education students have until June 1 to pay off their HELP debt or face a likely increase in their borrowing of about 5% at this point in time. For the US and other viewers, you may have more personalised loan repayments, so they're fairly locked in a way that the Australian loan system isn't. However, in Australia, anyone with a student loan who earns more than $55,000 has a percentage of their salary automatically deducted to pay back their loan, and this amount will likely rise from July 1 this year, after payment thresholds are revised to match inflation.
It's inflatable.
This is something that people in Australia are very aware of after the last couple of years of indexation causing a lot of drama. In other countries, this is actually a simpler, albeit more costly arrangement. But still, the principle for all of us is the same if you have student debt. You should be looking to pay it off. The sooner you can pay this off, the better. The debt isn't free. You can absolutely do more with that cash flow once paid off. The days of HECS debt being so cheap that you'd be better off investing that money have long since passed. The cost of carrying this debt is considerable, and so you should be looking to remove this as soon as you can. You need to look at how your payments are going and whether you can afford to increase them. This, of course, is a personal decision that will depend on your individual circumstances. A third thing, and again, this also depends, is whether or not you need to time the sale of your assets. Now, if you've got nothing to sell, just tune out. This has nothing to do with you at this point in time, but it will matter in the future, hopefully. This one may not apply to you. Younger people rarely, if ever, have anything to sell of enough value that it justifies a planning. However, if you're selling a home or a business, shares or some other valuable asset, you should consider not just whether to sell, but when to sell.
Only a matter of time.
This quickly gets into tax law that is very specific to each jurisdiction and country, so I don't want to jump into this in any great detail, because obviously I am only able to opine on my own experience. But it might be worth getting in touch with an accountant if you're planning to sell anything to ensure that you're structuring that transaction as effectively as you can.
You need to plan these things.
A fourth thing, you need to be considering whether it's time to do an emergency fund checkup.
Not this again.
Yes, this again.
You should have an emergency fund. If you don't have one, step one is to fix that and get yourself one. Easier said than done, I know, but it needs to happen. But even once you have one, it's not as if you set aside that money and you never think about it again. You need to be constantly reevaluating if you have enough money in that fund to allow it to serve its purpose.
How much money's enough, Stan?
An easy personal example is that my wife and I are expecting our first child, and that obviously is a big lifestyle change for us, which requires us to reconsider if we need to make an additional contribution to the fund so that it can serve its purpose as being a reliable fallback of funds if there is an actual emergency.
The trick is, you gotta be prepared.
But even for a less drastic lifestyle change like starting a family, we have all heard across the globe about the rising cost of living. Well, that means the cost of your emergency fund, or what I should say, the cost that your emergency fund is intended to cover, are actually probably growing by a substantial amount. So, what you've put aside that was once enough to cover 6 months worth of expenses 2 years ago, well, it's probably not going to cover 6 months worth of expenses anymore. It's time to review that and consider whether or not you actually need to make an additional contribution just to guarantee that emergency fund is able to do what you need it to do.
Wow, that was depressing.
A fifth thing is to review and adjust your investments. Now, I am not a day trader. I don't propose that any of you every year sit down and completely change your portfolio. But I do think that you should be engaging in a regular rebalancing if required, or at the very least be willing to adjust your investments to ensure that your risk profile and your needs are met.
I'd be stupid not to do it, right?
Or you should have a larger investment strategy that you're working to each and every year that falls into a broader life plan for yourself. And that is all for you to be able to meet your financial goals. You still do need to check up on this from time to time to ensure you're doing enough and everything you're doing is on track for the goals you've set yourself. Now, I'm a big advocate for most people not checking their investments regularly, in the sense that you shouldn't check them daily if you're a long-term investor, because psychologically, well, some of us just aren't able to bear the losses on paper. But you do need to be periodically reviewing this, and I'd say each year is a minimum. The start of the year may as well be the point in time that you regularly do this. What better time than now?
It's that time of year.
Number 6, review your financial goals. This is a great opportunity to reflect on the financial goals from your previous year and assess your progress towards them, as well as to turn your mind now to the 12 months ahead of us and what you want to achieve in this year. 2024 should have a different set of goals than 2023 had. Set clear, achievable financial goals for this new year, and this could include saving for a specific purchase, like a house or an investment property. Hell, it could be much simpler. You could be saving just for your emergency fund because you haven't got one and you've made that a priority. Or it could be paying down some form of debt, perhaps like what we mentioned above. Failing to plan is planning to fail. You've got to have some kind of roadmap, even if it's not set in stone. So take the opportunity now to set yourself some financial goals that you can be working towards and that you can assess your progress against.
It's good advice, right?
Number 7, look, if you haven't got one, create a budget, but assuming you do, well, it's time to update it. It is time to develop a budget that aligns with your financial goals, and we just said it's time to revisit your financial goals. So logically, it's time to make sure your budget still works. Be sure to allocate funds for the necessary amount of savings, expenses, and discretionary spending required for what your ideal balance is in life. Ideally, you've been keeping a budget in previous years, so you should have a good base to start with here as you roll your budget into the new year. But either way, you need to be tracking your expenses regularly to ensure that you stay within the budget you set for yourself and make adjustments adjustments as needed, and make sure that you're conscious of what it needs to look like in 2024. Are there any unique expenses coming up that weren't contemplated by a former budget? Or are there changes in spending that need to occur, or even maybe potentially a change in earnings? This all needs to be factored in to ensure your financial plan is appropriate for 2024. And step number 8 is to educate yourself. Take some time to increase your financial literacy. Read books, articles, or even attend workshops to enhance your understanding of personal and corporate finance, as well as other concepts that are important to you, like studying economics. Remember that this is a lifelong process, and it is always changing. Learning is not a stagnant endeavor.
Educate yourself, you fool.
An easy example of something that might become specific in 2024 for you is if, for example, you have invested or you would like to invest in a particular industry. Let's say, for the sake of an example, that AI is something that you are excited about and you want to invest in. Then now is the time to be investing your time wisely into learning as much as you can to help you make wise financial decisions.
Read a book, you dumb idiot.
If you're going to be investing in this sort of industry, you need to understand.
Well, obviously.
Stay informed about changes in the financial landscape and how they might impact your financial situation. There are obviously macro and microeconomic forces that you can only try follow, as they're not the sort of things, despite economists' best attempts, that can actually be guaranteed at all, but it is a good idea to be educating yourself nonetheless. Of course, one of the great sources of wisdom in my life, Nicholas Taleb, emphatically argues that reading some things, particularly the newspaper on a daily basis, actually makes you less intelligent.
That was a cheap shot.
The point being is to ensure you're reading the right material here.
And all your money on these fucking fancy books, you surround yourselves with them. They're the wrong fucking books. What are the right fucking books, Will? Hey, whatever blows your hair back.
Anyway guys, they're just 8 quick ideas. 8 quick things to consider. You don't have to do any of it. You don't need to do any of it. But I'd recommend you at least consider doing each and every one of them. And I honestly think if in doubt, just do them. You will be better off for it. But thank you for listening nonetheless.
What are we gonna do?
I've already subscribed.
Is that a hint?
Yes, of course it is.